The Philippines' shocking story of a Jewish orphan. Now, listen, the Philippines is absolutely incredible, which is exactly why I traveled there and loved my time so much, and all the people I met. Everything was incredible. I'm going back for sure with my fiance and friends. That's obviously in our checkbook 100%. Who knows, might even live there eventually. But for now, all we do know is that the Philippines is one of the best places on earth that you could ever visit, particularly because of the people and especially the history that has happened there. The history of the Philippines saving the Jews when the Holocaust happened and so much more. They've always taken that specific moment to be human, not for anything else, not for an extra this, not for a bonus, not for that, because of humans. That's it. We're human, you and I. Let us just be humans, man, and love each other. That's it. I'm excited for this because it is a story of an orphan that a lot of you guys linked over. So come check it out with me, please. Let's go.
Have you ever met someone who calls a country home, even though they weren't born there,
Me?
didn't speak the language, and had no roots in its soil? Let me tell you a story, one that starts in the ruins of war-torn Europe and ends with a man, an orphaned Jewish boy, saying with quiet conviction, "Everything I am, I owe to the Filipino people." Now, you might pause. A Jewish orphan from Europe, grateful to a country halfway across the world? Yes, and once you hear his story, you'll understand why. His name is David. Not the David of the Bible, but a boy who had also survived giants, war, loss, and exile. Born amid the chaos of World War II, David never had a chance at a normal childhood. His parents, German Jews, vanished during the final Nazi raids. He was just a child when he was hidden by resistance fighters, tucked away in barns, shuffled through attics, passed like a secret no one could afford to lose. When the war finally ended, David wasn't celebrating. He was wandering, another nameless orphan lost in the rubble of Europe. But fate had other plans. A kind-hearted nurse who had tended to survivors during the war took a chance on him. She heard rumors of a distant tropical country, a Catholic nation no less, that had opened its doors to Jews when the rest of the world turned away. That place? The Philippines. As early as 1939, President Manuel L. Quezon had welcomed Jewish refugees with open arms. Even while his own country stood at the edge of conflict, he chose humanity. And years later, that generosity hadn't faded. So in the late 1940s, David, 8 years old and carrying nothing but his trauma, stepped off a ship onto the shores of Manila.
He really did only carry his trauma. Just from that, being shuffled through barns like he was explaining. What a life, man. And I feel like taking that and not being overwhelmed by it, but going to a place like the Philippines, which allows and harbors growth in the sense of, mental freedom to be around people who serve as kindness as their main, pursuit, I feel like is the perfect thing. Because like he said, he carried nothing but his trauma. At 8 years old, you don't have anything. That literally just in itself makes me incredibly sad. But yet this is going to be so beautiful.
He wasn't on a vacation. This wasn't some overseas adoption or international program. It was exile, a new beginning he never asked for.
Yeah.
He held tightly to the hand of a volunteer he barely knew, staring wide-eyed at swaying palm trees and air thick with warmth and unfamiliar smells. But that's when something unexpected happened. He found kindness. A Filipino caretaker took him in. She didn't speak Hebrew, and he didn't speak Tagalog, but she sang to him at night, old Kundiman lullabies that somehow wrapped around his fears and made them smaller. Her voice, gentle and full of love, became the first soft thing he had heard in years. And that's how David, a Jewish child born in the ashes of genocide, found healing in a place thousands of miles from Jerusalem.
Oh, dude.
Ask him today where he's from, and he'll tell you, "My name is David. I'm Jewish by birth, but my heart was raised in the Philippines. He didn't know the language. He couldn't read the signs or understand the chatter around him. He had no idea what kain na meant or why these strangers, people he'd never seen before, kept smiling at him with eyes full of kindness and something that almost looked like worry. But one moment burned itself into his memory. A woman in a simple cotton dress, just a little older than the mother he barely remembered, knelt beside him. She didn't make any big speeches. She didn't ask questions. She just handed him a bowl of warm, fragrant arroz caldo.
Ooh,
No words, just comfort.
that looks so good.
She didn't speak a word of German, but she placed her hand gently on his head and said one word, Anak. Anak, you're safe now. That word, Anak. He didn't understand it, not then, but it hit him harder than anything had in years. It felt real. It felt like it meant something. And from that small, quiet act of care,
bro.
sitting cross-legged on a bamboo mat, David took the first fragile steps toward healing, toward something more, toward becoming Filipino. His new home was on the outer edges of Quezon City.
It's so crazy that I've been here too, man, and got to experience this whole, man. I'm glad I went. I will definitely be going back, bro. The Philippines is very, very beautiful. And like any other place, it has its hardships, but that's the point. It's what they do with those hardships that makes them so incredible. It's unbelievable.
His new home was on the outer edges of Quezon City, not in some grand mansion or polished apartment.
Yep.
His foster family lived humbly. The father drove a jeepney. The mother sold fish at the palenque. They didn't
fresh
have
fish,
much,
though.
but they made room for him like he was family. David's name was tricky for his new neighbors to pronounce, so the kids on the street gave him a nickname.
Hey! Oh my gosh. Yo, in Brazil, I used to play with something like this. Tied it up and make a ball when we couldn't have a ball. You know, when we couldn't afford a ball, when we couldn't, go get a ball, we would make something like this and play soccer. Ooh, that hits memories. So when you're explaining about a Jewish orphan, then you show me something like that, that's too close to home right there.
And just like that, it stuck. Even now, decades later, when he visits that old barangay, the elders still call out to him, Betoy, like he never left, like that little Jewish boy had always belonged. They remember how he played luksong tinik, barefoot and fast, how he laughed with his mouth full, eating with his hands like he'd been doing it all his life. But it wasn't just the games or the food or even the warm air that wrapped around him like a blanket. It was something deeper, something that slowly began to mend him from the inside out. At night, there was music, his foster father strumming old kundiman songs on a guitar he couldn't even read music for. The neighbors would gather and voices would rise in harmony, soft and full of memory. They prayed before meals, not in Hebrew, but in quiet Tagalog, giving thanks for the simplest of things. And in that household, there was a rule. No one eats until everyone is served, especially the child.
Oh.
That sense of community, it shook David. In Europe, survival had meant silence, caution, looking out for yourself, sometimes even betrayal.
Yeah, but then again, think about it. He was 8 years old, and like the first, consciousness that he acquires, he's looking at carnage, quite literal carnage happening all around him. Just envision that as a kid, thankfully as a kid, even in Brazil, I can envision stories of, being quote unquote poor and that, but I was definitely happy in the sense that, I would tie up like a bunch of bags together, make a ball when we couldn't, get a soccer ball of our own. But these memories I cherish because it made me who I am today. I don't ever hate those memories or anything like that. But in this kid's case, he was literally surrounded by death, quite literal death, and people in constant fear. And that can ruin a kid, can traumatize a kid. But they took him open-armed and showed him that life isn't just that. What you saw as a kid, you've spent only 8 years on this earth. You need to know that this is not all that there is. There's more to life. than that carnage that you witnessed. And I think that is the most crucial and most important thing.
But here, even the poorest family made space at the table. Even strangers were treated like kin, like kapwa, a shared self. Years later, a reporter asked David how he coped with losing his family in the Holocaust. He smiled, and in near-perfect Tagalog, he said, "I lost my people in Europe, but I found my soul in the Philippines."
Oh, dude, wow.
As he grew, so did his love for the culture. He jumped into play schools, learned to dance tinikling, even recited Filipino poems long before he fully understood every word. His Tagalog wasn't perfect, but it was real. Real enough to argue with his playmates, sweet enough to win over the neighborhood titas. But still, there were nights when the past crept in.
Yeah.
Nights when the laughter would fade and silence would settle in like fog. Because healing is slow, and memory never really leaves.
Yeah.
But one thing was certain. David was no longer just a survivor. He was Betoy now, a boy born of war, but raised by love. Then one night when he was 12, David finally asked the question he'd been carrying like a stone in his chest. "Do you think my mother would have liked it here?" His Filipino nanny stopped what she was doing. She wiped her hands on her apron, knelt down in front of him, and looked him right in the eyes. "Anak, your mother would have loved this land," she whispered, because it gave her son his smile back.
Oh,
That moment hit him deep.
yo, nah, don't make me cry like that, dog. Damn. How you hit a poetry? Oh my gosh. Yo. That right there made me cry.
That moment hit him deep. Not like an answer, but like a truth settling quietly into place.
Oh my goodness.
And for the first time, David began to understand what home really meant. Not a country on your passport,
Yeah.
not the place you were born, but the place where your sorrow is seen and slowly, patiently transformed. And that was just the beginning. When David first arrived in the Philippines, he didn't expect to stay. Honestly, at 8 years old, he didn't expect anything. Expectations were for kids with normal lives. David didn't
Yeah.
have that luxury. He had no dreams, no pictures of the future, just survival.
Of course, that's all he grew up into. You grow up into survival only. And then how do you even have time to think of things you want to be as a kid? You don't have time for that. All you're thinking about is, when is my next meal? You know, in a situation like that during the Holocaust, being little during the Holocaust. Because as an adult, you had a childhood, and then the Holocaust is still terrible and horrible and traumatic for adults. Don't get me wrong, but I'm saying even more so for a kid, because a kid doesn't even know what life is yet. You don't even know what it is yet. And you don't even know what it is to want to be something. And then you're grown up into just trying to survive and purely just trying to find your next meal and make sure that everyone's all right. That's a crazy thing.
He'd grown used to being invisible, the quiet boy hidden behind curtains or stashed in cellars, the one who didn't cry, even when he was starving. So when people in the barangay began noticing him, not as a burden, but as someone who mattered, it threw him off. Why would a stranger hand him food in the middle of the street? Why would the old man next door carve him little toys out of driftwood just because? In Europe, kindness was always calculated. If you got it, it meant something was expected in return.
Not
But
really.
here, it came freely. Without
I mean, to be fair, in Europe, that's not necessarily the case. Because in Europe, I've been to Europe. There's people who do things kindness. There is ones who do it calculated. I would say the Philippines has a lot more kindness as priority. But in Europe, there's plenty of kind people. I've met kind old people in Italy and in Paris. They're very nice. We'll give something. There's no calculation. And I just went there for vacation. They gave me, things for free, and that was that. And it was just being kind. But other than that, of course, there's calculation in different places. But I don't agree necessarily with that, it being calculated all the time. But in the Philippines, I do agree that there is a lot more priority with kindness, because that's number one for them.
reason. The first time that stopped him cold was during a storm. A typhoon had rolled through, pounding the village. Banana trees snapped like matchsticks. Water pooled around the houses. David stood at the window, watching the rain hammer the tin roof. His body tensed, waiting for the yelling, the fear, the tension that always came after disaster. But it never came. Instead, there was laughter. His foster father had tied a rope to a tree, and the neighborhood kids were swinging into the flooded street like it was a playground. Mothers passed out food wrapped in banana leaves. Someone turned on a radio playing old Tagalog songs. People were dancing, singing, smiling through the storm. It didn't make sense. Why would anyone celebrate in the middle of a mess? But the joy on their faces, it was real. It wasn't denial, it was defiance. And for the first time since he could remember, David smiled too, without even realizing it. That night, as they huddled together on sleeping mats by candlelight, his nanny handed him a slice of cassava cake.
Oh, yo.
Kahit binaha tayo, may biyaya pa rin, she said gently. Even when we're flooded, there's still blessing.
Wow.
That stayed with him, long after the cake, the songs, even the storm faded.
Oh man, I got
Blessing
chills, man.
in the middle of hardship. It was a language David's heart understood long before his mouth ever could. The second turning point came.
Yo, this video, man, they got so much like lines in here that really hits, man. Oh my gosh. It's so powerful what was being said. This is like life-changing kind of material because it's made me cry already almost 3 times. You know, like, dang, man. We still have, and the fact is, it is true. No matter what way you put it, it is absolutely truth. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to leave this earth. And with leaving the earth, we also have to remember that in the time that we're here, this is what creates gratefulness. This is what creates cherishing times with people, being kind, because that pays more. In knowing that when you pass, you've given people moments to grow. You've given people the expectation that they, or not the expectation that they aren't enough, but you gave them the realization that they are enough. When you're just kind, just period, nothing else in return, you're letting them know that, hey, listen, I care about you because you're human, and that's it. There's nothing else. Because I'm not taking money to the grave. I'm not taking anything else to the grave. Nothing's coming with me. The fancy car ain't coming with you. Nothing's coming with you. Only the memories and the people that you met. That's the last thing you're going to think about, you know? And that's the beautiful thing, man. So when I see a video like this, it definitely makes me want to cry because I obviously think about this like every single day, right? Death, but not in the way that you would think in a scary way. I think of it more so as memento mori, which is a philosophy about death, where I think Greek philosophers would have a skull next to their desk to always remind them that death will happen. And with that, it would make them not be afraid or scary or anything. It would more so make them realize that whatever I'm doing now, just know, make sure it's worth it, and make sure every time is cherished that you're doing right now. Make sure that you cherish it, all the small things. And I feel like this is why I love the Philippines too, because they just naturally do that. So when I see that stuff with the typhoon too, man, it's wonderful, man.
At school, his foster family had enrolled him in the local public elementary. It was a world of curious stares and awkward introductions. He became the Kano-looking kid, the one who didn't talk much. At first, the teasing came, not mean-spirited, just the curious, relentless probing only Filipino kids can master. They pointed out his nose, his pale skin, asked why he ate so slow, why he sat out during patintero and tumbang preso. One afternoon, after a particularly rough day, he sat alone under a mango tree. His classmates had tried to talk to him, and he had tried to answer, but the words just wouldn't come. Tagalog still felt like a dance he couldn't keep up with. That old weight returned, the one that pressed on his chest back in the cellars of Europe. Then, quietly, someone sat beside him. It was a small girl named Lani. She didn't say much, just held something out to him, shy, nervous. Para sayo, for you. It was a cheap comic book, one of those local superhero issues.
That's cool.
Colorful, wild, full of impossible rescues and brave characters with secret powers. But to David, it felt like the most generous gift he ever received. Because in that moment, he realized something. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was being seen, welcomed, known, and piece by piece, day by day, the boy who had nothing began to become someone again. "You're Tiny Tony," Lonnie giggled. David blinked, confused, but when he opened the comic she handed him, he saw it. A tiny man with oversized courage, standing tall next to villains 5 times his size. Not a hero because he was powerful, he wasn't, but because he tried. David didn't say anything at first, but Lonnie sat down next to him anyway, turning pages, pointing to words slowly, patiently. "This one," she said. "Too long. It means help." That moment mattered more than anyone knew. That's when David started trying to speak Tagalog, not fluently, not perfectly, but with intention. For him, it wasn't just a language, it was a key. And what it unlocked wasn't just his mouth, but his heart. The third moment hit him when he least expected it. He was walking home from the market balancing a bag of tinapa when he froze in place. On the roadside, an old beggar slumped half asleep, his head nodding forward in the heat. Nothing new. David had seen beggars before, too many. But what he saw next, that was different. A jeepney driver parked nearby stepped out, not to yell, not to chase the man off, but to hand him a cup of Tahoe. Warm, sweet, still steaming. The driver even opened the straw, stirred it, and set it gently in the old man's lap. No words, no photos, just a quiet act of grace. David stood there, stunned. The driver was clearly poor himself, his shirt faded, his hands blackened with engine grease, but he gave like he didn't think twice. That's when something clicked. He realized he wasn't just in a different country. He was in a different kind of world.
Yeah, different
One where
world.
dignity wasn't something you earned with money or power. It was given freely, by default. No matter your job, no matter your name. And suddenly, David remembered something his real mother had whispered to him during their last night together, her voice shaking with fear and love. "Be kind, even when it's hard." Here in the Philippines, kindness wasn't hard. It was the air people breathed.
Yeah.
That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay awake on a banag mat, listening to the quiet hum of crickets and the soft rustling of banana leaves outside the window. His thoughts drifted to Germany, to the war, to the parents whose faces he was starting to forget, but whose love still echoed in his bones. And then, without thinking, he whispered a word to the ceiling. Salamat. He wasn't sure who he was thanking. God, his Filipino family, the jeepney driver, maybe all of them. But for the first time in his life, that word felt like more than just a phrase. It felt like belonging. Because David wasn't just surviving anymore. He was starting to live.
That was an incredible video. There is just so much there. And I feel like the ones that people linked over here were incredible. Some was cut out, I think, because of some copyright and stuff. But thank you guys. Seriously, this was so beautiful. Luckily, it got the whole story, though. And I feel like it got the majority that really made me cry and I felt was very, very important to be seen. Unbelievable. I love it so much. Man, stories like this really, really hit me different. Thank you guys for linking it over. And thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Hey, if you liked it, leave a like. If you loved it, subscribe. If you want more, let me know down in the comments below. And yeah, till next time, guys.
Yeah.
Peace.
Look.
How good you been living? Wait, how good you been living? I've been living too good for you. I've been living too. Did what I did and I do it again. Every move that I make, I ain't feeling repent. Nobody believes to believe it's a friend, and you question your moves like you really won't end.